Hello and welcome to another discussion between Mr. LaRouche and the six-candidate national slate. Obviously, we're meeting here in the aftermath of the historic Russian elections where Mr. Putin won 63% of the vote. But as Mr. LaRouche pointed out last night, nothing has fundamentally changed in the situation. This was not a surprise, and the situation still remains that nobody has acted to remove Obama from office. And for that reason, we face the danger of a thermonuclear launch, which will come suddenly and without warning. And the people who have acted, who have failed to act on Mr. LaRouche's warnings, will be culpable for the possible virtual extinction of the human race.
Well, we've promised all so far through the series of discussions that we've had on these premises each week that there would be changes in the tempo and temperament of the discussion. And that has been so far the case, and it is emphatically the case now, that anyone who has certainty about what the situation is in the world today, has no definite certainty about what will happen next. We know the situation in general. We know that the British have two programs. Obama's part of it. And one program is to threaten to go to thermonuclear war, and the other is actually to go to it. Now, we're in the phase of the threatening to go to thermonuclear war, which is actually coming from Britain, not from Obama. Obama's nothing but a puppet, a stooge for the British. And he does not have necessarily the same outlook that the British do in this case. The British are much more serious. They look at this as existential for them. They come to a point where the entire international monetary system is in a process of breakdown, especially in the transatlantic system. So whatever happens under the present conditions, the present monetary system is doomed, which means, in effect, that any money you have or you think you have in the banking system doesn't really exist. And when somebody says that, it's like when someone sneezes, the whole thing is all over, the money is all gone, and then the people start starving to death rapidly when they discover their money is non-existent or it's fake, it's worthless, as in Germany in 1923. Only this is worse than 1923. So the British are hoping that the world will capitulate to them. And if the world does not capitulate to them, they are prepared to take their stooge, Obama, who's nothing but a British stooge, and has no real full intelligence about what the hell he's doing. In that case, the British will, if they're allowed to do so, will launch thermonuclear war on a more or less global scale, and that will be the end of civilization. Now, what would happen is, of course, as I've said before, we're looking at a situation in which there are forces in the United States and to some degree in Europe who are opposing this process. They are not saying everything they know about this process, because what they're saying is what's going to be said for effect. It's not said for revolution effect, factual information. So that's where we stand. We are on the verge of a collapse of civilization in one of two ways. Either the British and their puppets, including the United States government under Obama, launches thermonuclear war, thermonuclear attack on Russia, China, and other nations, at which point the signs of the thermonuclear attack being launched will prompt Russia, China, and other nations to launch a counter thermonuclear strike. And it's quite doubtful as to what will remain of civilization on this planet or the population on this planet as a result of that outcome. The British interest is entirely different than Obama. Obama is simply a Nero-type character who committed suicide when he found out he had lost the war. Mm-hmm. So in this situation, we're faced with the possibility of, if we can stop this process, we can save civilization. But that would be the end of the British Empire, because For example, what do they fear the most? The reason that my name keeps coming up in those circles is that what I proposed. I proposed that the policy for the United States in particular is to immediately Glass-Steagall, go back to exact Glass-Steagall as Roosevelt had done. Now that would eliminate the obligation of the United States system to support these kinds of banks, the kinds of banks that have all this fake money. They'll be left and they will go bankrupt. There's no question about it. Frankly, all of the commercial banks, the commercial banks will be saved in some part. And the other banks will not be saved. Most of them will disappear. But that's not a loss because those banks are already gone. They're worthless. So how can you lose something which is already worthless? But some people are seized with the idea that somehow or some way they're going to be bailed out again. So now we're at a point where we're on a nightmare, a trigger kind of thing, a hair trigger kind of situation, where at one moment the decision will be made to, somebody will capitulate, presumably, like Russia and China would capitulate. If Russia and China would capitulate, which is what's being said, compromise with us, you won't kill you. If that were to happen, that would be the death of civilization, if there was any compromise. If they don't compromise, then the danger is war. And the keystone in this is the case of the United States. If the United States refused to allow its forces to be used on behalf of the British Empire for prevent a war, for a thermonuclear war, then they couldn't do it. The British Empire could not possibly launch the kind of attack which they have as their second choice. First choice, intimidate nations to capitulate. Well, we'll negotiate with you. You capitulate. You give up your ability to defend yourself against us, and we'll allow you in. Then we'll kill you. That's the deal. If they don't and the British don't have the support of the United States, they cannot launch this kind of war. So it's the cowards, or worse, who say capitulate to the demands of Britain and Obama, who's nothing but the puppet of Britain. And that's where the issue lies. Now this is going to result in, immediately, as we've seen some signs in Germany, for example, and elsewhere, there's a sudden change in the political scene as the sense goes out that we're on the verge of thermonuclear war, which now involves the Israeli threat by Netanyahu, not by the Israeli government otherwise, but by Netanyahu and company. It's supposed to be the trigger for thermonuclear war. The meeting over the issue of thermonuclear war issues is happening now. That's what this meeting is. And all the double talk means exactly that. And so we don't know whether the strength of those forces which are opposed to this kind of development in the United States will hold up or not. Russia has held up. And Russia is not going to commit. It's not going to submit.
Right.
And China's not going to submit. So therefore it's up to this side to submit. No thermonuclear war. Now this is the context of the campaign we're talking about here. So you should think about what happened over the period of the weeks that we've had having these meetings, and realize that that has been the underlying reality toward which we were approaching all these. So all the people who were thinking in different terms were wrong. They were incompetent when they didn't see things in this way. When they talk about this election's going to work out for this guy or that guy or this guy. No, this has always been the case. The system was headed toward a breakdown crisis. And now we've got the point, we're at that point, and therefore, and since we are not going to since Russia is not going to submit and China is not going to submit, is the United States government, on behalf of the British, going to launch thermonuclear war. Now, most people out there don't understand this. They just don't understand it. But they are reacting to it. As we saw in one case in Germany, we got some significant support from our people on the streets of the city in Germany. This is a change in the mood of population in response to this kind of situation. So therefore, those who thought we were silly, like our poor former president, just failed to understand this and wanted to make a deal when there's no deal to be made. So now the thing is changing. Those who thought they had the case situated don't have it situated anymore. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. I know what can happen and what the parameters are of the choice that will be made. I do not know what, at the last minute, certain forces are going to do. No one knows, not even those forces, because they don't really know what the other's going to do. So we're sitting in a situation where we're just as important in the immediate future. Our small organization, our small campaign committee, is just as important and probably more important than either the Republican Party generally, which is a mess, or the Democratic Party. They are the ones who are not real. We recognize, or should recognize, what the limitations are of our foresight. Their conception of foresight is totally wrong. If you're following what Bill Clinton decided to do, you're wrong. You're being stupid. If you're one of the Republican four creeps we got over there, you're worse than stupid. You're disgusting. And we are in a situation where we're in the catbird seat. We're the ones who can see what's happening, who have seen what's coming on. People just didn't want to believe it. They said, oh, you're a small organization. You won't have any influence. We probably have more influence than these large parties. But even we who know this can't tell you exactly what's going to happen because we're on a hair spring. Yeah? And either way, it can go. Either way. Either the United States decides not to do this, Obama is brought under check in some way, or we're going to hell. That's quite a campaign slogan. That's the truth.
Well, there was this full-page advertisement in the Washington Post today, which I think is quite unusual. At least I can't think of a precedent where you have top, General Hoare, Anthony Zinni, saying, don't do this war to Obama. And then they have quotes from Dempsey and Panetta. I mean, this is quite an amazing, and it also does underscore how obviously insane and impermeable Obama is, because why would they have to take to the pages of the Washington Post to get a message? In other words, they have to mobilize the American people because the president is nuts and will not change. So it's clear what you're saying. I mean, the only assurance of this, of us getting out of this, would be the removal of Obama. When the top military are forced to take to the pages of the Washington Post, that it doesn't seem to be a very good situation.
Or somebody decides that the Obama will no longer be obeyed. That's it. It's only if Obama is not obeyed will the people of the United States survive in the short term. Only the refusal of forces of the United States to allow Obama to give the orders on behalf of the British monarchy. That's the only chance we have right now. And there are various ways that can occur. I don't know which will occur. I know what the options are, but I don't know which of the options are going to finally decide what happens. I've made my peace with whatever happens. And I'm sticking by my job while that's going on. And that's the only thing that any of us can do. Nobody can do any better than that. You've come to one of those moments in history where the possible extinction of the human species is online. But how many people out there have the guts in the right positions to do the right thing? As I know this population of ours, over the past decades, since Kennedy was assassinated and nobody did anything about it, we've been sliding in this direction all the way. We're now on the edge of a possible human extinction.
You know, Lynn, the contrast, though, of just where we're at, that the entire reason that this has come to where it is, where the British are moving now for this thermonuclear war against Russia and China with the intention to get them to back down. And of course, what is it that they want them to back down from? It's all of the kind of economic and the projects on space exploration, nuclear power, railroads, the extension specifically around your projects that we've been fighting for decades now. The Strategic Defense Initiative, what the Russians are calling the Strategic Defense of the Earth, the extension of the railroad from Yakutsk to the Bering Straits to hook up there, the whole question of the Arctic development. They've put all this on the table, and this is why the British are now targeting them to get them to back down and submit to the oligarchical principle of monetarism, environmentalism, so on, right, to give up their sovereignty. But it's stunning if we are able to take the American people and just get them to, in a sense, go up to where we need to be in terms of the space exploration, to look at the strategic defense of the Earth policy from the standpoint of being able to defend against these asteroids, and get them to, in a sense, raise their imagination up and then look back down at this planet to say, well, what in the hell are we doing on the verge of a thermonuclear war when this is the future, you know, in terms of what is on the table were we to avoid this war.
You have to adjust your argument there, because there's a deeper aspect to this whole business, which is governing. The problem is, as far as we know our history, and we know the biological history of the human species better than we know the political history of the human species, because we don't have an actual record of what people actually said to each other or thought to each other during earlier periods. So we have a certain period of human history that we know. Now what we know is this, and you can't put this on the stage of these are the issues and this is what's going to happen. No, it's much deeper. As far as we know, mankind has been dominated with some resistance, powerful resistance, by what's called the oligarchical principle. And this is what the issue is. The issue is that people in most countries believe in submission to the oligarchical principle. They believe that there's inherent forces represented by money, power, and so forth. And there's a class of people who represent that, like the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, the Crusader system, the British system. What the fight is all about is whereas on the one hand, the human species and living species generally are vectored in a progressive manner. Only doomed species do what the human species is doing under the oligarchical system. Huh? And this is what we're dealing with, all these Wednesday sessions we're now having. Huh? This is the thing to look at. Look at those scientific issues which we're discussing every Wednesday in detail. That is the key to understanding the political and strategic situation. And what we're putting on the site on each Wednesday is what the news is that tells you what this all means. It's not some people don't understand something, or some people want this, or some people want that. You've got to get at the bottom. Why is it that where every species which does not progress goes extinct, Why does the human species tolerate governments and systems and beliefs which go against the trend, which would lead to the extinction of the human species? We are dealing with a problem which is the self-willed extinction of the human species. If we lose, the species goes. So it doesn't make much difference whether we win the war or not. It's that we stop the war and change the system is what the issue is. That all these damn fools that think they can run a war now with thermonuclear threats, with British intention, no, they can't. Because either way, if the British and those who support them get their way, the human species is going to go extinct. So what's the war about? How can you win a war which you are going to lose if you play it by those rules? That's what the issue is. And it's mankind's stupidity, the stupidity of our people, the stupidity of the education we administer in our school system, the stupidity of our universities, which teach doctrines which teach you this. Green, for example. What's the greatest single threat to the human species today? Green, the green policy, the greenies. Because what they do would cause the extinction of the human species under these conditions. Your local greenie is your best choice, most convenient choice of enemy to deal with. So let's not try to look this in so-called formal political terms. You have to look at this in existential terms. Mankind has been always going through these agonies of periods of mass destruction. Now we take mankind and take the will of mankind today and say, what are the weapons of mass destruction today? Let's go back to the Roman Empire. Well, they marched a lot, they did a lot of things, killed a lot of people, but when they collapsed, another system came in of the same type, the Byzantine Empire. And the Byzantine Empire disintegrated for the same reason. And all these times, the methods of warfare became more intense and more effective and more destructive. So what you're looking at is a process of mankind, of a willful choice of motion toward self-destruction. And when the time comes that the weapons are mass famine throughout the planet, including thermonuclear warfare, and thermonuclear warfare represents a set of tools which, when used by powerful nations in concert and in conflict, mankind has a very slim chance of surviving. So the problem you're up against is not flesh and blood. It's expressed in the form of flesh and blood. But it's not flesh and blood. It's in terms of a principle. Does mankind accept progress? Scientific-driven progress. Does it mean going back to space exploration? What about all the damn fools that aren't fighting for the space program anymore? They are murdering the United States by their refusal to defend the space program. That is, they are refusing all the mechanisms by which we could save mankind, called green. The policies of the Democratic Party leadership, the policies of the Republican Party leadership, the British Empire. You have to go into Asia or Eurasia to find people on this planet who are willing to fight against the oligarchical system. We, in the transatlantic system, are a bunch of damn fools who are willing to start to kill each other and to kill the Eurasian side for the sake of tyranny, an oligarchical tyranny. But the oligarchical tyranny was always headed toward the doom of the human species if it persisted. As the oligarchical system became more and more powerful weapons, more destructive in its willful capability per capita, with our toleration of that system threatens the sudden extinction of the human species. That's not politics. That's existence. And
Right,
we're studying, and every Wednesday, more and more we've gotten in his reports on how a species is destroyed, the self-destruction of a species, how it destroys itself and dooms itself to destruction. That's politics, real politics. And that's what we're paying attention to every Wednesday in our weekly report. And there's where you'll find the truth. That's not the full truth, but that's a process of opening up a broader discovery and understanding of what the truth is. The question is, in the universe, is mankind as a species morally fit to exist? If Obama is not defeated, mankind has judged itself as not morally fit to exist.
Well, Lynn, one of the ways that I think I've noticed this, the way that those people who actually do have in the United States an intention to drive the space program and make breakthroughs, because if you still have a small handful of people, for example, at NASA that are able to do important things, like I was talking to some people there who want to bring fission and fusion to the moon. They want to mine the moon. But what's happening right now is, since the Obama administration is canceling all the programs that are based on taking even rovers to the moon and to Mars, they're having to conform to a theory, and they were lamenting this very much. But they were basically trying to still get things up there by just doing it on the cheap and doing it small and accepting very long mission times and very extended times for these things and very slow rates. And so anyone who's trying to work within that right now, like to work within a NASA mission that still includes going to other planets and doing things on other planets, is, in order to be able to do anything, is having to basically accept almost getting absolutely nothing done. And you can just see the way in which the whole system destroys the creativity of the people involved in it in this country.
Yeah, but the problem is, even those people don't have the guts to face the truth of the matter. The truth of the matter is not slow progress. That's never been the case. The truth has been that mankind by nature, as a species, tends to move in an entirely different direction than politics tends to move. You're dealing with a system where the human being is hated by something in the universe. So therefore it tries to keep the something under control. And then it gets to the point that the human species is about to break loose and actually do something, and that you get a killing of a President Kennedy. Since the killing of President Kennedy, people in the United States, the oligarchical system, moved and said, oh, guess who did it? It was done by the British, who were running an operation through France and Italy, who deployed some professional assassins across the Atlantic, into Mexico, across the Mexican border, into the United States, killed the President of the United States. They were trained to kill de Gaulle, but they would use them to kill the President of the United States. Then they crossed the border in the same minutes that they fired the shots, leaving the mess for somebody to explain. There was a complete cover-up by the whole system, went along with a cover-up. What's the reason? Because morally, our ruling strata is not morally fit to survive. They will do things in a limited way, in a direction which is convenient for them. They will accept convenience. But what will they do when it comes to the showdown? When the dinosaurs decide they're going to save their system. And that's where we are. We just must not kid ourselves. This is not a problem of politics as ordinarily politics. Look, the whole thing, people say politics. Well, you've got to go with the majority vote. That's insanity. under these conditions. You've got to go with a non-majority vote to get the majority to move in a direction they're highly reluctant to do. Otherwise, the species is going to disappear. You've now come to the point. Mrs. Dinosaur, did you vote for Obama? Because that's where we are. If you vote for Obama, you support Obama, you are a dinosaur. And remember what happened to that wonderful species with all its inefficiencies and stupidities, you know, ponderous big feet and probably unwashed toes and something, all these things, right? And that's where we are. We are not acting as a human species. We're acting as a subhuman species. If you want Obama, you're really not a human species. And the issue is the issue, if you want to get at the point, which it makes it clear to people what the issue is, you've got to avoid all these explanations. You've got to think in terms of the mass deaths, the great kills of species which we can no longer afford to keep in this solar system.
And this gets at exactly what a real war of avoidance policy represents, because you're talking about a change in the thinking of the population, a change in the entire system, because a war avoidance policy is not just going out and saying we don't want the war, or to have, you know, anti-war groups out, but it really is a point of whether or not the human species is going to make the decision that everything that they have come to accept as quote-unquote popular opinion is tossed out the window. And I think this gets at the very core and principle of your latest paper that you wrote, Principle versus Populism, and the fact that over several decades now, really since the assassination of President Kennedy and even going back further, you've had a break away from the conceptions and ideas of what people should be organized around, why we have adopted the policies that have dominated our society for the past several decades, really since the assassination of President Kennedy. And so now a war avoidance policy would get at this very question that you're speaking of. Can the human species change their method of thinking from a oligarchical slave mentality to one who is going to actually take dominion and control over the universe?
You got to picture again what our Wednesday meetings are and reports are extremely important, and I think that even in our own organization, that most people don't understand what underlies what we're doing in the basement operation. The history and in the basement itself is what the subject has become more and more over the past several years, is exactly this. You have a long trend in what we know as the history of the galaxy as well as the solar system. And there's a process of upward movement. And this process of upward movement always comes at the expense of destroying something which is no longer useful to the process of upward movement. So therefore, the conflict is always, and has been among human beings, is the business to try to save our power, to save our system against the threat of the system which must replace our system. In other words, we are either the adherents of progress or the adherents of established power. And established power is inherently doomed. So those who are opposed to progress are inherently doomed, and those species that refuse to resist progress are doomed together as damned fools with the rest of them. We've now come to the point where the ability to fight and to control the world's population with the destructive force of thermonuclear power is now deployable in the form it's now deployable, has brought matters to a point beyond all the great kills of oligarchical systems which have occurred in the past, to finally the last oligarchical system now goes with its neck in the guillotine. And either we take charge in continuing progress of mankind, or we take the green policy, the green directive. That green policy must be destroyed. And if we don't do it, nature will. But if we don't do it, we won't participate in the credit for doing nature's job. So this is not a political issue in the normal sense. People who talk in political terms are generally turned up to be damn fools. We have no idea what they're talking about. They don't understand science anymore. They don't understand any of this stuff anymore. They're just poor, silly fools. But it's our job to try to save the lives of these damned poor, silly fools, such as our former President Clinton, who's acting like a damn silly fool on the skein of existentialism. And our job is to try to do our job to continue the progress of life in this planet and to do whatever is necessary to defend life within this planet and beyond. That's the only politics they are. And those who are green, it's not that they don't have bad politics. They have bad breath as well. So what? It's the fact is that if they are able to control civilization, we are all doomed because of our failure to control them.
Well, in this, go ahead, Summer.
Thank you. I have to say that this is definitely a bit of a breathtaking discussion. I think it's difficult. It seems like what's being raised here is that there is a way to forecast and know exactly what will end up happening in the long run. We know that we're looking at a mass extinction crisis, and we know that the kind of species type that the oligarchy represents is the kind that's going to go extinct and take human civilization with it, so long as the human population bows down to this. I think the difficulty, and this did come up yesterday in a radio show that I did, where the host asked, well, how do you make sure that the legislation that's passed is enforced? And I know that one of the accomplishments we made in this organization with the Fusion Energy Foundation was the passing of a fusion bill that the intention was to have commercial fusion power by 2000. And obviously that was 11 years ago. And the bill was passed, it was signed by Jimmy Carter at the time. But that what many people didn't understand is that you do have this hidden oligarchical principle. I don't think it's an easy conception to get across to people, and I think you know that, and we all here involved know that. But that last time we talked about this 10% of the population, and I think that 10% of the population, I assume, is the population that we've got to get to understand quickly this concept of the oligarchical principle. But obviously, the only way to get at this is something that Sky's been getting at, and you've been talking about, it's been in discussion on these Wednesday discussions, is that you can't get someone to understand this oligarchical principle at all unless they get a sense of what human creativity actually is and what this really means. Because the intent of that oligarchy is to destroy mankind's creativity. That's been the intent all along. So in some way, I don't know if we're going to develop upon this in some way, but how do we get this? What role can we play in getting this concept across to the American people? They have to understand it, it seems like.
You have to reach people on a deeper level than we probably do. You have to have the courage to educate people, and that does take courage, because what you're doing, you're challenging people to recognize something they should recognize, which is essentially in their interest. But they're so afraid of what their neighbors are saying, or some other potency, political potency in society is saying, that they say, well, you may be right, but I've got to go along with this. And how do you do that? You challenge them. Oh, you're another sinking coward, huh? And that's the only way you can deal with them. You have to say it in some way. Well, we can't accept that. And if we go down, you're to blame. people like you are to blame. If people, all your friends and family start dying off, you're to blame. You didn't do anything about it when you could. That's the only argument that you have. When you try to find a nice argument that's not contentious, you're a coward. And your cowardice condemns you too, along with the guy who's you're trying to be nice to.
Well, I think this issue of progress, you know, what the basement crew has been going through on these Wednesday calls, that you can see that that's the foundation as well for morality. In any other standard, any other conception, it just becomes what politics has become, which is simply opinion. You know, I've got this opinion, you got this opinion, and there's no real standard by which to judge. I mean, if you think of the conception of progress or die, you know, what the universe is laying out as this mandate, then you could see how something like environmentalism is evil in that sense, right? Now, but at the same time, I was just reflecting on this yesterday. I was at a town hall event. Congressman Adam Smith was here, and a number of people showed up, and they were people who I know, who I've, you know, different discussions with, know that they cannot stand what this congressman has done, which is voted for every one of the wars, every one of the police state measures. So a number of them have been very vocal on their opposition to this, to his policies. And, you know, from the very outset, it had the environment of you know, they were getting out the ropes, preparing a lynching. And one woman started out immediately on the National Defense Authorization Act, which he's a co-sponsor of. The next woman was a young child in the Japanese internment camps out here, and said, how could we possibly be going with this again, with this kind of you know, imprisonment policy? And another woman laid into on the question of Glass-Steagall, and there was this whole, but by the end of the whole thing, just by pure political sophistry, just by pure just dodging and weaving and whatever, this audience, which had come in to lynch this guy, had turned into, you know, adoring fans. It was very, because they don't have any kind of ability upon which to know something to be true, and therefore politics becomes like what we just see there, where it's just this social engineering. Just you say the right things, and people don't even know how to judge. They have no foundation for morality to be able to see, like, no, I know that was bogus. I know that can't work. So it's just very clear, if you don't have that scientific conception, this question of human progress as the foundation of morality and what politics should be, then everything else is just opinions and just people get swayed this way and that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we have to fight against.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't fight against it, who will? And if we don't fight against it, what will happen to mankind?
What we saw in this last week, which was definitely interesting, the population seems to have been robbed of the means by which to express their fear, because I think people do have a gut sense that we are on the brink. But when they saw that we were doing something and you had a sense of mobilization conveyed on the website, we had a record number of people, a lot of old friends, a lot of people who had been out of touch, calling in and saying, I want to come to the rally, I want to be in this day of action. Yeah. So they are responding, although they would not, without us, they would have no means by which to give voice to this.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. That's our responsibility. Exactly. Without what we represent in that respect, there is no chance for humanity right now.
Well, it makes sense from what you brought up also about the fact that it's time for both parties to be over. I mean, no one is looking for leadership in either parties They are very demoralized on that. So when they hear us telling the truth now, they do understand the need for that now. They do have a sense, I think, that we're not going to make it till the election. And the question...
No, I was just saying this thing was what happened in Germany. We suddenly had this turnout in one location for our members. Exactly.
Right, and I think that also what has been made clear by the Russian elections and the election of Vladimir Putin as president of Russia really shows that this British Empire, their system is at a point of total collapse. It's finished, and the Russian people have shown that they're not going to allow for their sovereignty to be destroyed. But we also are dealing with a situation, as you said, where in recent statements, where nothing has actually changed. As long as people don't have the courage and the guts to do as we've said, to remove Obama from office through impeachment of the 25th Amendment, you're still dealing with the same crisis. You're still dealing with the situation that the British Empire is set to go for thermonuclear World War III. And we were just talking about this from the standpoint that, we will be addressing with you on this coming Saturday, March 10th, in response to the Russian elections, the next phase of our discussions with, and what we're going to be doing with this national slate in this discussion with you in terms of what has to happen next. But the reality is that we don't know, as you've said, what's going to happen between now and Saturday. And now all of human species, human existence is on the line. And so it comes to that very decisive moment of what, if people can actually, the population can be moved to put down their populism, put down their fears, and do everything they have to do to act now to save civilization from total destruction. Because you're seeing as the escalation continues, we have this APEC meeting this week. Obama, everything that's coming out of his mouth is a complete lie. Netanyahu is a raging lunatic who keeps saying we got to go after Iran. This thing is serious. It's more and more evident that as long as you have the British Empire's puppets ready to go for thermonuclear war, the only thing that is going to stop it is a major intervention
of a few people who lead it.
Yes.
Exactly. That's the way it always works in history.
Let's send Netanyahu back to be a furniture salesman in Philadelphia. He'd do better there.
But probably he's a bad salesman. Got to give him a different job.
We're counting on him being a bad salesman this time.
Anyway, that's where we are. We are in this situation where, on the one hand, there are certain facts which are clearly evident for those who think clearly, and the question is how the damn fool's going to react too, and how are we going to do what we must do to hold up our end in this process, and we'll hold up our end to the end. We have no choice otherwise. And the issue is mankind going to continue to exist as a species? It's that simple. And those who are going against us have not earned a victory on that count. And you have to operate on the facts that we know what we're doing, and we know the cowardice and corruption which guides the hands of those who oppose what we're doing. And but for us and people like us, there is no chance for humanity now. When you have thermonuclear weapons of the type that exists now en masse, and those thermonuclear weapons are in large degree under control of the British Empire, which is an empire, and which controls Obama the President of the United States and what that means. We are crucial. But at the same time, while our knowledge is true, and while our knowledge is crucial, if nobody comes to support it, if no one is pushed to support it, even against their inclinations, mankind is finished, or virtually so. And that is the certainty in the uncertainties of this situation.
You know, Putin's part of the rally that he led, where he said the Battle of Borodino, I might have the pronunciation wrong, but this was the Russians' stand against Napoleon, the invasion of Napoleon, which really around this same time we were dealing with the War of 1812, when the British were moving to recolonize us. And at the same time, Napoleon, who was effectively a British agent, was moving into Russia. So I say we should get that spirit of 1812 again, crush the British, and we'll let the Russians crush the British on their end too.
Yeah, the detail of that case is that battle, which was a delaying battle. Let the winter come on. And then the Russians did what Napoleon did not anticipate, that Moscow was a trap for his forces, that his victory was his defeat. And that's exactly the kind of way you have to think in these circumstances.
But I think you also have to have the confidence and the courage in going into these situations, and I think this is what Dave is saying, that we can win, and that mankind, the creative powers, the anti-entropic development of mankind represents the ability to understand that we can overcome the oppression of the oligarchy upon mankind, and we can actually defeat this oligarchy and win for mankind. And winning for mankind really gives you the courage to continue to go out and fight. I mean, you don't know what's going to happen, but the fact that what the future represents, the future holds, this idea that, you know, we can have the common aims for mankind and the developments of the greatest scientific progress, space exploration, Mars colonization, all of the things that we should have done a long time ago, is not to be seen as far off and out of reach, but should be seen right within our hands' reach, within our known future, that this can be accomplished. And I think that is what gives us the courage, and what gives other people the courage to know that that future is right in front of us and we can actually grab hold of it.
You just keep the fight on. If you keep the fight on, you might win. If you don't fight, you'll lose.
Okay, I think that's a good conclusion. And as Keisha mentioned, we will be having a national simulcast broadcast with you on Saturday at 4:30 Eastern Time in 6 different locations.
I tend to be alive for that occasion.
Good. I hope we do too. So if people are watching and want to attend one of the live events, they can call into the website. There's a 800 number. So we'll be seeing you then, hopefully.
A bientôt.